Uh, Welcome to the Radio FWD podcast. My name is Sean Gralnick. I'm very excited to bring on a high school friend of mine and fellow movie connoisseur, Michael Galaid. Michael,
Connoisseur.
welcome.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
That's
the title of it. I have affixed to you, so
great.
We're sticking with it. So yeah, Michael and I went to high school together and slowly both got into film pretty much at the exact same time. So I feel like our tastes have developed and morphed into one over the years. We have like obviously slight differences in taste, but I mean, this is the dream. You get to come visit me in Toronto, and then we spend the entire time watching and talking about movies instead of visiting the city. So welcome to Toronto and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, loving the city and happy to be here.
How does it compare to Boston?
We've already talked about this, but not that Boston's dirty, but it is clean here.
Yeah.
It's clean. And, Boston has, a nice skyline as well. But, as you brought up, the CN Tower kind of being that beacon right through, guide you around the city.
Yeah.
Especially when we went out to the islands.
Yeah, that was the perfect day to go.
Great skyline. Great place so far. Great food.
Yeah, so Michael and I saw the new Ari Aster film, Eddington, at Scotiabank Theatre on opening day, pretty sure.
And he is back.
He is back. We are getting ahead of the discourse.
Because there will be a lot of it.
Yeah, it's going to be completely insufferable. Which, as soon as I saw the rating curve, I knew that we were in for a fun time. I actually hadn't seen Beau is Afraid until very recently. As per you pushed me into seeing it. Like, definitely see it before we watch Eddington. I heard like glimmers that it follows more in line with Beau is Afraid. Eddington does follow more in line with Beau is Afraid than like his first two films, which is immediately obvious, right? Yeah.
That's true. But after going back and watching Hereditary maybe a few days ago, stuff catching on the second watch is that really plays into this film is with kind of the plot of Hereditary being that they're kind of a family doomed from the start due to this mother who's a part of some Satan-worshipping cult, that there's such a lack of free will in any sort of attempt to control your own fate is moot in that film.
Yeah.
And I think that relates very strongly to a lot of how people felt during the COVID era, and I think that manifests in editing in some pretty hilarious ways.
Yeah, definitely. So this is a heavy spoiler discussion. We're going to be talking about the entire movie in extreme detail. So if you haven't seen it, go check out Eddington. Yeah, when I saw that rating curve, I was prepped for something completely diabolical, unhinged. But it actually felt so grounded, and I think that's what's going to piss people off. Is that like it's going to be like a rejection of what that time felt like, because I was like right back in 2020. There's like a number of shots of social media feeds. The camera is very often like looking directly into an iPhone screen. Mm-hmm. And there's so many shots of, a character doom scrolling, whether on Facebook, on 4chan, on Twitter, on their phone, on their laptop, wherever it might be. But the feed and just like the constant barrage of information that in the context of a film is like fun to dissect and fun to like pick out all the small details and like the funny gags that Ari Aster hid in each of these shots. But in the context of like actually doing it and frying your attention span and your mental well-being, I think it gave off a very familiar feeling. Like all of these feeds feel super real.
Yeah. Well, I think that there will probably be many people who don't like about this movie is kind of a criticism I've levied against movies before, is that it may be denoted as surface level or way too on the nose in terms of its depiction. But I think it's easy to forget how ridiculous a time it was we were living in 2020 in terms of the online sphere, and that I don't think you can be too on the nose in, presenting Joaquin Phoenix reading headlines about Hillary Clinton's body double being in Guantanamo Bay.
Right.
These were, the type of Steve Bannon-esque podcasts that were being pumped out left and right, making millions of dollars. This was grabbing the masses.
Not just the masses, but the Trump administration that was now embedded with all of those people that were part of that economy, right, who are now in power.
Yeah, I mean, I think I look back to, like I was saying films that are too on the nose. What comes to mind that kind of was the first sort of foray into, I'm going to say modern genre like this is Don't Look Up, where there's a lot of feeds and Instagram feeds, which feels corny and preachy in that film to me. But in this, it just feels like an absolute accurate representation of the absurdity of the 2020 online sphere and everything surrounding it, and presenting it in comic relief while also it balances that line of comic relief and the disturbing stress that and sense of doom that essentially clouded over everyone's head for a year plus.
So what are some of your from the film's headlines? What are some that stick out? I mean, I'm remembering like the TikTok feed that says when you finish James Baldwin, what is it, James
Baldwin book, and it's a girl doing
Giovanni's
a
room, and she's doing a TikTok dance over it. It's so good. I mean, that's in the trailer. Everyone knows that one, but it's just that's so funny. And then he swipes, and it's the sheriff of Eddington fighting a protester at a rally.
That's like completely. Well, the irony in that is that essentially that was. It's out of context, but just in terms of how it's presented in that reel, I guess, as police brutality, that's ordered by the mayor to remove that individual. So essentially conflating those lines of, we've talked already that this film kind of rejects the red, blue, black and white team side of thinking, in that the context behind that reel, when you see it scrolling on, it's, easy to just say the police are horrible and need to be defunded. But essentially, they're being called in by the liberal mayor to remove a homeless man.
Right.
Saying that, it's not as simple as there's just one bad side in this 30-second clip.
Yeah. The out of context clipping is that's like a theme throughout the film too, where you can tell that Sheriff Joe's wife, played by Emma Stone, her mother is like essentially just consuming headlines and things that are exaggerated beyond belief but out of context. And then it's also like she gets Emma Stone to read the first like quarter of a Wikipedia article on top of these like absurd media headlines. And I mean, I'd love to talk about like sort of alienation and atomization that I think Ari Aster is getting at in these films, in this film rather. All of these social media feeds are like curated for exactly one person, but you end up in these vacuous bubbles that just like send you deeper and deeper down rabbit holes. And I think this film clocks that better than any other film. And I have to say, partly because of the inclusion of 4chan, even if it was a small, tiny little tab on a random laptop screen, I think Ari Aster is so like terminally online that he understands the pathways super well. Because like I was saying, we were talking about this before, but 4chan's not this like scary, nebulous dark web place. It took ages for any sort of real analysis about the right-wing sphere, about the kind of right-wing grooming or radicalization that happens on 4chan, but it's not a secret. Like, you can go on there and look. And I think the first like real depiction was in a documentary called Feels Good Man, and that's all about like internet memes and 4chan memes specifically, and how it like created the Pepe the Frog meme and like alt-right symbolism and that sort of thing. But we've never seen it like depicted like this in a work of fiction. But I think Ari Aster nails that like radicalization so well, and it feels stressful to watch. And it's so well done.
I think he does that. This film just so well depicts the different avenues to radicalization, because I think that the whole arc with Emma Stone's character and her mother are most emblematic of a lot of individuals who fall down the right-wing pipeline. So first you sort of have the boomer type mother who is probably getting shared stuff on Facebook,
Right.
who is going down a rabbit hole of these headlines, such as like in the film where they're talking about connecting the number 56 to the 56th mayor, to Tom Hanks' 56th
The
birthday.
Duratology or something like that, the study of numbers.
Exactly, and connecting all that. It's like that viral video of the woman who's presenting the Monster Energy drink.
Yes, that's such a good connection.
And
exactly.
I think that, I mean, what was that, maybe like 10 years ago that video made circulation, and to see how that's essentially like 5% of the internet at least at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas everyone was laughing at that on like iFunny or whatever.
Right.
But getting back to kind of...
Well, sorry, to bounce off of that. That's the start. That's like always undertailed evangelical online circles, like the Satanic Panic.
Mm-hmm.
But that the new wave of, you know, analyzing numbers and finding patterns and looking for the clues. Of course, the evergreen Nick Mullen joke about the clues. It's clue time.
It also brings me back to the first season of The Rehearsal, where there's an individual who's walking Nathan through the house that he lives in, and he's always seeing numbers and is relating that to astrology.
Right, but there's an element that's now removed from like religious satanic panic to a completely essentially like godless or atheistic secular belief system that resembles religion in a pretty strong way, where there are like these humanity saving characters like Trump, and then there's like evil forces that need to be reckoned with. Mm-hmm. You know, Soros or the Democrats or whatever you might say. There's a reference to the WEF at some point, the World Economic Forum, in the film, like in reference to, I think it's Austin Butler's character, or maybe in one of the speeches he gives. But there are like these little droplings everywhere. Like,
no, this is a film that you can, and I probably anticipate seeing a second time, because there are so many minute details that Ari Aster is clearly leaving in for only himself to recognize in the filmmaking process, that I'm sure even, you know, the actors looking around the set are probably not understanding what this is in reference to. Whether it's, you know, the you're being manipulated, YOUR, that's on Sheriff Joe's car, or just the surreal shot of an AI data center called Solid Gold Magic Harp, being the final shot of this film.
Right. I think very much reminiscent of the images of Amazon warehouses popping up in small communities that essentially become like company towns, communities which infrastructure has been crumbling, jobs have been leaving, their industry, whatever industry it might have been, maybe steel or coal or something like that, is now being replaced with clean energy, for instance, or tech, right? These stories that we hear all over the U.S. And then the promise of the liberal mayor is not that he is going to build infrastructure by, I don't know, like, not that there's many rich people in that city, but like raising taxes or something like that, or by, I don't know, or
Public housing, transportation,
whatever it is, right? Or
public
like
goods.
reducing the budget of the police force, and
Well,
building.
in all fairness, the
have-
police force is
Three
comically
cops.
3 cops.
Yeah, that's right.
Who are completely inept and also have one single cell in their
Right.
200 square foot office.
Which is pretty much always occupied by a homeless person or somebody who's publicly drunk, intoxicated or something, then just like released back into the streets. No, so that infrastructure is not being built by the city. It's being promised by private agreements with a, like you said, tech
Essentially,
company.
whoever's giving funds to, in this case, Pedro Pascal's mayoral candidacy.
That's right. So Solid Gold, Magikarp being the last shot in the film, I think is it's great because Solid Gold Magikarp, from what we understand about what it does, it's about deep learning, AI. All of the companies that are producing the feeds that we see in the film
That's
rely on these sort of technologies, right?
Yeah.
They're built on machine learning, AI algorithms that, track your data and give you the most perfect, personalized for you page, right? I mean, this is not an original idea or anything, but Ari Aster is, he's getting at that idea, I think. How much power these companies have that they can just like come in and take over a town, basically, or a mayoral campaign.
Well, it's ridiculous saying the name over and over, but the Solid Gold Magikarp.
SGK.
Yeah, SGK. We'll Solid Gold. SGM. We'll dub it SGM.
Jesus. Tired.
I think that, well, it's described in multiple different ways, which is so emblematic of, I'm no AI expert, but in terms of just swapping of words when it comes to AI, data collection, machine learning, Gen AI,
deep learning,
just
exactly.
as if they're all one thing, and not under an umbrella. But the first shot of this film, if I remember correctly, is out in the desert, and it's sort of like a construction board saying like reserved land for data center.
Right.
And sort of what you were talking to there regarding how these sort of corporations are what are creating these algorithms, which are kind of generating to some level mass psychosis,
right?
Especially during the 2020 age, where you're scrolling.
During lockdown, a prolonged lockdown.
Exactly.
Isolated from people, isolated from your coworkers, the people who you spend the most time with in your life, isolated from your school. Yeah.
But and I think that sort of something that's emblematic, especially of American society today, is that sort of the quote unquote enemy is eluding the characters in this film the whole time, because essentially what is causing so much division and strife, especially at the family front between Joaquin character, Sheriff Joe, Emma Stone's character, and her mother, what's sort of causing the division between them is this sort of algorithm that's pumping out conspiracies and giving them all this impending sense of doom. And this results in Emma Stone essentially being groomed into some sort of sex cult.
Right. Austin Butler's. It's so hard to pin his stuff down too, which I think it's intentionally blurring the lines. Like, it's not a necessarily political, like explicitly political. Austin Butler's character gives like these political speeches, like, oh, what is the you are not a coincidence. We are not coincidences, but it's so nebulous. It's like vibes based. It's not really political. There's no like call to political action. From what we see on his website, he's just like a spiritual guru of some kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But essentially you're seeing essentially this tragedy play out where Sheriff Joe goes on a murder rampage over losing his wife to a sex cult, and the mother-in-law is completely distraught. And essentially, you can argue that this is all because of these timelines, which are being put into play in the way that they are through these sort of data centers. Because as you said, they're the ones who are collecting all the data and then generating the algorithms to make us lose our minds in the simplest terms. And rather than the energy and the energy that we have, it is
going towards some political project.
It's going towards not necessarily a political project, but towards each other. I mean, I'm just thinking of the big rally scene where you have the black cop being told to switch sides by the young white liberals, the cops who, have animosity towards those who don't respect their profession. You have all these different kind of divides that you can argue are all being put into place by these data centers creating algorithms that are essentially making us want to be more divided. And it just looks like that sort of the enemy is lingering in the background, just this, and doesn't really manifest itself until the very end once it's built. And it's almost like, it's a tragic ending where, all this hatred has been brewed up amongst all of us. Nothing has changed from that 4 years later, except that now there's even more infrastructure to gain even more data on us.
Yeah.
To create even more divide.
Plus, now they're all bending the knee to the current administration to grab more power as they sell off the American government to private interests, as they, allow companies like Palantir and Facebook to XAI getting a defense contract. Like, these companies are just getting more and more access as time goes on. It's going to get even more crazy, probably, the degree of information that they have on us. I want to go back and talk a little bit about those rallies specifically, because I think the George Floyd protests and what happened, couldn't have happened at a more opportune time for the sort of reaction that did happen across the country. Months of lockdown. I mean, I'm rehashing things that people have talked about for the last 5 years, but I think the film put it to words really well, put it to screen really well, how in a small town like Eddington, these things were happening all over the country. These spontaneous rallies, these reactions of sorts where people have just, they were having one of the characters who we can talk about, Brian, the young kid who's at first just interested in politics to just get girls. And I think that's a very honest depiction of the way a lot of people get into politics in the first place, and that's totally fine. I think that's another thing that people are gonna get really upset over. But Brian, this character is just interested in politics for the sake of getting with this liberal girl that you were talking about earlier, the one who's the most politically engaged throughout the film, and is then later implicated in the killing of the mayor, of Pedro Pascal's character, because her purse was left at the mayor's house. So Brian's character is kind of, we get to see his whole arc, right? We get to see his entire radicalization happen.
He is essentially proof of horseshoe theory.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I don't necessarily think that's a concrete thing, but you see that play over in about 30 minutes of airtime.
Right. I think it's more like, people are opportunistic. I think that's a good way of putting it. Politically opportunistic. Their beliefs are malleable as long as they benefit their own lives. I mean, the big proof of concept is Brian ends up near the end of the film saving Sheriff Joe, and ends up becoming this
what an
like
amazing shot.
Yeah.
Of the camera down on Sheriff Joe's face with a knife through his brain.
Right. He ends up saving Sheriff Joe at the end, and becomes this savior figure type, but then just ends up launching a right-wing podcast where like he's sponsored by some weird energy company and supplement company, and he's talking about, I don't even remember what he's talking about, but just something that fits perfectly in line with like an InfoWars or Charlie Kirk type podcast show. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or maybe not even that, but more so like an Andrew Scholl's Nelk Boys kind of thing. Where it's kind of a pseudo political. That's not a slight. If anyone wants me on the pod,
I don't think they're listening.
Schedule's free. They might be. So they're from Canada. So
from Canada.
The Full Send pod, I would love to come on.
You try and change their minds, change their hearts.
No, I just want to have a happy dad with them. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, his arc is really like, I think my favorite of the series, because we were like the same age.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like, I mean, a couple years older.
We were like early college. He was late high school.
Yeah, exactly. But in probably our social media feeds looked exactly the same. You see him opening Instagram and it's just a bunch of black squares. You know what I mean? This is like the peak of performative activism, and like you said, that girl who ends up yelling at the black police officer about like, which side are you on,
you should
boy?
You should be on our side.
Right.
Which is without even like doing a nuanced political take. There's something
about policing,
extremely absurd about a young white girl yelling in the face of a black man.
Well, she even acknowledges
that he's not on their side,
right?
In relation to the George Floyd protests,
right? Yeah, it's crazy, especially because he says what happened was terrible and a tragedy. Even like Sheriff Joe doesn't do the whole like, what else was he doing? Like, was he on?
Actually, they do.
Not him though. It was it was Guy, the other officer. Guy, who is like a right-wing nut, and jumps on the opportunity to frame Michael, the black officer. Mm-hmm. Takes right away. He's skeptical of him, doesn't trust him. They don't trust each other really. Their trust disintegrates the second that Michael might be implicated in killing the mayor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it just kind of shows how sort of the bad apples can rise to the top, because there's a conversation between Sheriff Joe and Guy before they put him in the, tiny 4x4 foot cell. That Guy's saying, I thought he was, one of the good ones, essentially.
Right. There's so many details in the film. And I think another thing that might not land with everyone is just how wide of a net it casts. The film is 2.5 hours long, and just filled with like 2020s or 2020 semiotics, just like constant symbolism and imagery. And
there's just so many different individual archetypes at the time, and I think it's really interesting how well it feels like all the characters, even though I think the big names in this. Pedro Pascal gets shockingly sniped. It can't be any more than about an hour 15 minutes into the film. One of the main leads in the film, main names. Emma Stone's screen time is much smaller than I anticipate. Austin Butler maybe has 2 scenes.
Right.
So, but you even think of these characters, just the scenes that they are in, you feel that you have such a either connection, maybe not a connection, but you understand these people so well.
Yeah.
May that'll probably resonate for people differently in terms of how they lived through the time, whether they were like the mother-in-law, reading about Hillary in Guantanamo Bay or Pizzagate, or they were just doom scrolling like Joaquin Phoenix. But I think it's impressive what Aster does with how all of these characters, whether they receive, it feels like he's on screen all the time, Joaquin Phoenix's character, or barely in the film, how you can relate them to, either people or people we see on the internet, like we already have during this conversation. And I think that's, he just hits every sort of individual archetype at the time, whether it's, the black square.
I mean, we grew up in Boston, where I think the kind of liberalism is more relatable than like a gun-toting sheriff or like, people going into grocery stores refusing to wear masks. If that is something we saw online, like all these crash outs and public freakouts that just go viral, and it adds to the anger and adds to the, it's just psychosis. It gets harder and harder to watch just like normal people lose their minds online. But like you said, there's a aura of relatability in any city you grew up in, any city that you might have been in rather during that time. But particularly relatable was the Antifa super soldiers at the end, which I would love to discuss a little bit more about.
I mean, it kind of drops as a little Easter egg foreshadowing at the time they're introduced. This sort of luxurious private plane flying in men in black masks towards the tiny city of Eddington is the jarring turn into what
the last act of the film.
The last act of the film, this sort of scaling of this sort of North by Northwest-esque scaling of a mountain while being chased by a killer, which honestly is such a highlight. One of the highlights of the year, this entire sequence, which perfectly nails the intensity of sort of these standoff chase scenes in typical Western films, but also is just absurd in nature and hilarious.
It is comical. Joaquin Phoenix has a couple of great physical comedy gags, falling down the mountain and like
the constant use the constant use of the inhaler.
The inhaler and his asthma attack.
And then right at the end, no more squirts left in it, kind of signifying, this is the end. There's no way to guess that there's going to be a knife-wielding man who's going to leap into the air and stick it right in through his skull.
Yeah, but the language around these Antifa super soldiers, it's like not clear whether they're paid bad actors. Obviously, Antifa is not an organization, first of all, or not an organization nationally that has access to like private jets and tactical equipment,
drone strikes,
like setting up, kidnapping Michael, the cop, and then holding him hostage and doing like this political statement with the fire that spells out no peace. There's an earlier fire right on top of the building that says like no justice, and then so they have like the slogan no justice, no peace. So it's left ambiguous whether this is some sort of ploy to make left-wing politics look bad in in the national headlines or something like that, and that now they get to put the blame on Antifa or whatever other ambiguous left-wing forces there are for the killing of this mayor, that the George Floyd protests are violent in some capacity. They always reference the looting that is happening across the country.
But essentially just turn the blame away from, the tragic death of George Floyd into individuals who get, in the final shot, of the reels of Michael being photoshopped with Marjorie Taylor Greene, which is too on the nose, but in the best way.
What is the headline is like Marjorie Taylor Greene nominates him for some award.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I get what you're getting at, that it's left ambiguous as to whether, as you put them, the super soldiers.
That was a phrase that I think Trump used.
Okay.
The Antifa super soldiers was in the national discussion at that time. That phrase, that exact phrase, Antifa super soldier, was was a phrase at that time, and something that was referenced as if this is a massive political force in the country, which it's not. There are certain cities out there. Seattle is like an obvious one because they had right after. I'm not 100% sure if it was right after, but they had that CHOP, the Capitol Hill Occupation Autonomous Zone, or CHAZ. Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone that was led by some anarchist groups in Seattle that wanted to have a section of Seattle that was free of policing, that was self-policed, that was built on mutual aid or something, and it had to exist within the system of policing and government that we have today. So it failed miserably, and it was an experiment and a reaction to all of these things that were happening. It's understandable that it happened, but this is not something that happened nationwide. But Antifa became like this buzzword for the right of left-wing violence, but I like that it was left ambiguous whether this is something that's actually Antifa, paid actors, or something actually Antifa. I also like the idea that Joaquin's character has to get a COVID test because you see him just slowly get sicker over time.
Oh yeah,
and that obviously I think is not obviously. I think that's also falls in line with his political radicalization, or him, doom scrolling more and more as he's alienated from the rest of his family, from his wife, as things are heating up in his city or in his town. So he's getting sicker and sicker, has to go get a COVID test. He hasn't been wearing a mask the entire time, so it's kind of foreshadowing that, okay, he's obviously going to get COVID. I thought he was going to get COVID and die. I thought he was going to, get super sick and die from COVID or something like that, and that would have been
But sort of, as you said, sort of the build up as he's getting sicker and sicker through the film. It does start in, I want to say maybe mid-May, so it's not long after, we're first, hearing the president go on and talk about the first COVID case.
Yeah.
So it is...
and COVID is not in Eddington yet. At least that's what they believe. That's what they think, right? As time progresses, he's getting sicker and sicker, and it's not 100% clear whether the super soldier event at the end is maybe a fever dream. Maybe he's so sick and delirious that I'm just putting it out there. Maybe some sort of sick COVID fever dream, and actually his injury near the end of the film could have been a COVID injury because people were permanently disabled from COVID. It was a very serious illness that people try and lessen. Just
no, just being permanently on Twitter, as I am,
right?
Unfortunately,
yeah. As we're ashamed to admit,
you still have. It's consensus now on the we'll call it like the Joe Rogan right, the do your own research crowd, which is referenced throughout this film.
Yeah, with hydrochloroquine ads, right?
Yeah.
In the YouTube feed. Oh yeah, that was as Sheriff Joe is watching a video on how to convince your partner to have children, and then at the bottom it says the truth about hydrochloroquine. Yeah, that was a great little detail too. But yeah, the Joe Rogan right. The consensus now about COVID.
Oh yeah, is just that it's accepted as a hoax.
Or the severity of it, that lockdowns were an overreaction, that...
Yeah, like in reference to any like headline now, it's like, don't we remember what they did with COVID? Don't they remember how they lied to us about all these things?
Right.
I mean, more than 1 million people died in the U.S., which is, that's just sort of here nor there. But I do want to get back just
sure
on terms of the ambiguity of these super soldiers, because 2 points. I think if you've listened to just Aster, I forget what it must have been Cannes where this premiered, just talking about the film, or if you've heard him on multiple podcasts, I think it's unambiguous where he lies generally politically without saying he's left or right, but in terms of his leanings, I think you can deduce from that where he stands on kind of what he's going for with that sort of plot point in the film. But I think it's extremely intentional that's left ambiguous, because it's trying to be emblematic of how these sort of events happen, and they can be portrayed in whichever way to lead you either down the pathway of, this was set up by not an AI corporation, but by the right in making you hate your neighbor, or by just
shiny solid gold Magikarp.
Yeah, with these sort of events never turn towards the big forces at play, the actual entities that are creating this divide between all of us, but rather it's the left saying, oh, the right your right neighbor did this, who worst thing they were probably, a lot of these people were doing at the time is just not saying they can't breathe in their mask while going into a grocery store, or it's the people on the right who are saying that it's just this Antifa block, and this somehow is the more damaging force than what sort of spurned a lot of the discourse at the time, the summer of 2020, which was the George Floyd killing.
Right. I also want to mention that, like, it's not like the right is the only political force, or the people on the right who are into all these conspiracy theories that are the only ones susceptible to social media programming or falling into rabbit holes. Epstein is a good example of a amorphous blob that you can look at from either side of the political spectrum. If you're on the far left, if you're if you're socialist but also like terminally online, and you read about Epstein, and you find nuggets of information about all of these politicians that are potentially blackmailed by him, or that he's, that he works for Mossad or has some connection to Mossad. The left has its own canon of conspiracy theories, right? It has its own social media rabbit holes that you can go down, right? It's not the focus of the film, Eddington.
Mm-hmm.
I think the more surface level liberal social media feeds are definitely shown, especially the young kids, the high schoolers, all their Instagram accounts, mixed in between shots of just teenagers being teenagers and hanging out or whatever. There's the black squares, obviously, and then also just
the dancing that James Baldwin.
Yeah, that's right. I don't I don't think Ari Aster is just saying that social media programming just happens on the right, or not programming, but social media rabbit holes only exist on the right. You know, I think he's just talking about the damage that sort of alienation does to you.
In the most reductive way to put it, he's saying everything and everyone is fucked, and we are
By
all
these
living.
companies,
We
yeah.
are all living in such a hellscape anytime we open our phones.
Yeah. But it's not just phones bad. I think if it was just phones bad, it would have been a much worse movie.
Yeah.
You know, there is something that he taps into that just feels so realistic but exaggerated that makes it so... It doesn't make it annoying to watch.
No.
To me. I don't find it, like, pandering or aggravating. I don't think he's talking down to anyone, really. I think he feels bad for people living in this climate. Yeah. I think he's very sympathetic, actually.
Yeah, I mean, especially with Emma Stone's character, there is just an underlying empathy. In this film. I mean, you know, we talked about, you know, theories of Emma Stone's character, but the clues sort of lead me to believe that she was abused by her father. And you look at these abused characters who, you know, in the real world, in, you know, coming back to the Epstein case, get used as political points, more so by the right, but, you know, it does get done by the left as well. But essentially how these people get used for political points and, you know, without actually, you know, having an actual empathy for these characters, they end up being the ones who not even fall into, but get pushed into by her mother-in-law to this Austin Butler conference and end up being a part of just a whole nother wave of cult.
Yeah. I also like the mention of when we find out more about Emma Stone's character, she shows up on social media, on her social media feed, to denounce Sheriff Joe's accusation against the mayor, against Pedro Pascal's character, right? But there's a conversation that they have together with Austin Butler present, where she says, you know, these forces are real, child abuse rings, or, you know, these, like, sex trafficking rings are real. The average pedophile abuses 50 victims. Like, these movements, like Sound of Freedom, like that whole era, that whole film, and like everything surrounding it, the only thing that does is harm actual victims of child abuse.
And you see where their hearts actually lie when you see, you know, the big right Twitter heads, you know, as Trump is further digging himself in a hole and making
with
the
Epstein,
whole Epstein connection seem more specific just over the last
and
couple
they're trying
weeks,
to, like,
just say,
under
we have
the
bigger
rug.
fish to fry.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to focus on the border.
But forget actual child trafficking, which obviously happens. The vast majority of abuse that, like, children face comes from families, from their family, from the home. And when people see the rhetoric around child abuse being like these rings, these cabals, like hidden cabals of sex trafficking or whatever, that just harms actual victims of, and the left and the right are both responsible for that rhetoric being shifted away from, you know, making victims feel like they can safely tell someone about what's happening. And instead, there's just the whole idea is that, well, that's not actually abuse. What really is abuse is these, like, underground rings of
exactly.
Of abuse.
It makes there be almost like a tier list.
Of
what
real, of what a real crime
of
is.
what is you know, severe versus quote unquote regular.
Yeah, for sure. And Emma Emma Stone's character falls victim to that very thinking.
And exactly, and turns to sort of a fatherly, cult-like,
Yeah.
Charles Manson-like figure
Right.
once those around her are trying to relate it to some sort of big scheme, political scheme in the mayor.
Who, by the way, is also a victim himself, Austin Butler, and describes an instance where he lost several years of his memory from the abuse and then had some sort of tantric therapy sessions of meditation to recover lost memories, where it turned out that he was actually a part of some underground cult or underground sex trafficking ring. When, again, if their stories match, which I think they do, the Emma Stone and Austin Butler's character, then it's very likely that he was also just like abused by a family member or something like that. And then in order to fit in what happened to him with the rhetoric that he hears, or that the online sphere talks about this sort of crime, to fit in, he has to tell a story that matches that sort of thing. Otherwise, it didn't actually happen. If the only crime that exists is some massive conspiracy, then if you're planning to get help or heal from what happened to you, then it has to match that story that they tell, right? Otherwise, well, that's not really what happened, or that's not really a crime, or So he definitely nails that. Because we hear about, like you said, we hear about these crimes being employed for political purposes and political gain. Labeling someone as a pedophile is a very easy way of destroying their credibility. Yeah, winning. That's very fair as well. Winning a rap beef. You can go into that if you want.
I didn't know we were going to talk about the Drake and Kendrick stuff, but a year later, I think a lot of us have to look in the mirror and read the lyrics and see, now that this isn't just because I'm in the six. A lot of people got to go back and revisit those songs. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. Well, baseless accusations that harm victims is exactly what we're talking about. Not that I don't know. If it's true, whatever, it's true. But you just like call someone a pedophile, and like you said, that's an easy way of shutting down and poisoning the well. I also think poisoning the well is something that happens throughout this film, right? Like, for instance.
Yeah, elaborate on that.
Near the beginning of the film, the Pedro Pascal's son wants to go to a party, wants to go to a gathering, and gatherings have been banned unless they're like less than 3 people and double distance.
6 feet, yeah.
I mean, you and I, when I went back to the States to live in Boston for a while during lockdown so I could be with family, you and I had a couple of gatherings. Me and Oscar.
And just sitting
on lawn chairs in the front of my dad's house on our driveway. That was the extent. I mean, there was a lot of paranoia and uncertainty, and it felt right at the time, and it still felt like we could keep some I don't know, some feeling of regularity, you know? So, being a teenage boy, he wants to be with his friends. Like, that's not an evil thing to want.
No.
Pedro Pascal is obviously concerned about the optics of that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
If they banned gatherings and his son is caught, which was a massive political scandal in both the U.S. and in the U.K. famously.
Yeah,
which
of
was
either
the
politicians or their kids.
There
were images.
Yeah. So I think he either learned from it or just knew instinctively that would be bad optics if they ban gatherings and they're yelling at people for not wearing masks at grocery stores, and then his son goes. Anyway, so his son goes to one of these gatherings. He goes to a party, and he meets up with his friend, Brian, and Brian's trying to hit on this girl, and he brings up Angela Davis, who he just 5 seconds ago looked up on Wikipedia, and goes, did you know Angela Davis was awarded the Freedom Prize by Vladimir Lenin by the Soviet Union? which
obviously means nothing to receiving a quote-unquote communist award to the liberal.
For sure, yeah, it means nothing. She's like, just blanks him, blank stare, like, oh, okay. And then they get into some sort of discussion about privilege, and Brian very bravely brings up, well, I think not all white people are privileged. I think there's all sorts of different types of privilege, to which his friend responds,
You forget your red hat at home, buddy.
Yeah, you forget your red hat. That sort of like poisons the well, completely shuts down his conversation, his take, and I think that kind of
just shows that it was made a sport at the time.
Yeah,
It was
it's performative.
left versus right, it was blue versus red, and there was no in between.
Yeah. Also about the social gatherings, right? Later on in the film, Pedro Pascal has like the mayoral his campaign, right, for mayor,
which is the scene of the summer.
Right.
This is the funniest scene of the summer.
Sheriff Joe hears about a noise complaint, and Guy very kindly lets him know that we think it's the mayor. Are you sure you want to do it, or do you want me to handle it?
With everything going on, estranged from the wife, he's got like 5 signings on his petition to get on the mayoral ballot.
Yep.
It transpires, and I'll let you describe it.
Yeah. He very bravely shuffles up to the party as Katy Perry's Fireworks is playing in the background. He marches down to the DJ booth as the mayoral campaign, which is a large gathering outside, everyone's sipping drinks. Sheriff Joe comes in and everyone pulls their masks down very performatively.
Or rather, pulls it up.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, they cover their faces.
Mm-hmm.
And the Sheriff Joe walks up to the DJ booth and kills the music and walks away. And then Pedro Pascal turns the music back on. They get into this back and forth. And they get into the stare down, and Pedro Pascal just unleashes the best bitch slap I've ever seen. Slaps him across the face twice.
Yeah, not once, but twice.
And sends Joe down the
just into an absolute fugue state.
Yeah. Just walks out of there in complete silence.
Just it
shock.
Is clear such a big part of this film is people trying to gain control over this uncontrollable force of the virus and the politics surrounding it and the online sphere. His only form of control at this point is to be able to shut down gatherings. Right. And he is completely just made so small.
Yeah.
His wife has left him, and now he is just put in his place completely by the mayor, which just leads him on an absolute American Psycho styles rampage.
Right. I would love to talk a little bit more about that. Feelings of control and like grasps at control. I think every minor character has their outburst, right? We see at some point one of the residents of Eddington tried to get into a grocery store without a mask because they feel like they can't breathe with the mask on. And Sheriff Joe defiantly shows up also without a mask in the grocery store, talking about how policy isn't law and how it's unenforceable. They get into the very same arguments we heard online at the time. The masks thing was another element of like societal psychosis and like the freakouts on planes after they brought flights back. So we know the language. We know these arguments. They feel that scene felt it was so hard to watch. That felt
everything was painfully accurate. From the people in their cars alone with a mask on to those who are just not wanting to wear a mask in a grocery store, just because they want some semblance of control. And we've already talked about it, but this leaves no one spared in this film, and exactly why it's gonna ruffle feathers, both on the Trump and Kamala supporting sides.
Sure, but even just someone goes in with a mask and that is his outburst of like feeling like he's losing total control. Society is shutting down around him, but this is my defiance, right? Same thing, very same scene. Somebody comes up with a phone and sticks the phone right in his face and is recording the whole thing and trying to get a rise and a reaction out of someone. That's their form of like emotional outburst or control or just like waiting for something to happen so they can go viral or they can feel right and vindicated, right? There's also Sheriff Joe's big outburst, which is he gets to go shut down Katy Perry's fireworks, and then he clearly doesn't have any control over the situation. So what can he do? He kills a homeless person, murder someone. That is his big outburst. I brought this up when we first talked about it, but I think if you guys haven't seen Waking Life, the Richard Linklater film, there's a great scene in that film which I was immediately reminded of, and I'm always reminded of anytime I catch myself watching like some sort of Karen freak out video or public freak out or crash out video. There are moments of unempathetic virality of somebody having like a nervous breakdown or a mental episode, and they are permanently on the internet known as that person now. Like I always think of the woman on the plane who like sees something.
Yeah, that motherfucker's not real.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, she had to like apologize for it, or she like explained herself. But that is
she used it to get fame as well, which is exactly what Michael does at the end of the film.
Right, but I don't like in that one moment of virality, and it feels like your world is crumbling. It's like unimaginable how it feels to have a million people have an opinion on you and whatnot. But just recording that, and so this is like this is the gist of, you know, the emotional outburst. But the scene in Waking Life is about a person feeling like they don't have control in society, and this is their one political move or political action that they can take. And he goes to a gas station and fills a jerry can and lights himself on fire. And that sort of self-immolation, life-altering single decision of slapping the sheriff or killing someone feels like when you are like a rat in a cage and you have no moves left, well, you got to press the self-destruct button.
Definitely reminds me of the final scene in First Reformed as well.
Oh, yeah. Yes, definitely. That feels... that feels like cataclysmic, though. Like you're faced with the climate crisis. You're faced with not being able to reveal your true feelings for someone while also rejecting someone who loves you and not allowing love into your life. All of these swirling forces that feel like world-ending in their own ways, especially the climate crisis.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, Ethan Hawke's character in that film is extremely nuanced, but more so just, I mean, you can relate to any of the characters in the film of Eddington who are self-destructive in that they're faced with a crisis in the background. It leads to self-destruction.
Yeah. And he's Ethan Hawke's character in that film is a true believer. Like, he's very deeply religious. He really cares about his small church, which has been turned into a gift shop and has been commercialized and then further commercialized by the they have like a 200-year celebration of the church, which is all sponsored by a company that is polluting the water of the neighborhood that they are trying to serve. And he is then radicalized by a environmental activist who he gets he develops a relationship with. That's a very good connection.
Yeah, I would
very
be
poignant.
surprised if Ari is not a big Paul Schrader fan and a fan of that film in particular.
The downward spiral of every Paul Schrader has a style and has like a writing style, especially like The Card Counter, Taxi Driver, all of these films of like slowly losing your grasp and spiraling down.
Just various character studies on people in sort of like Kafkaesque situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very impactful.
No, I mean, everyone's got to see this, but I think that this is a great double bill with Hereditary, and I'm happy I watched it early on because he does in Hereditary implore this sort of semi-nihilistic point of view on free will. And in that film, Toni Collette's mother, the more she tries to gain control over grief, ends up, bringing spirits into the world, which ends up killing everyone in the family.
Right.
Where essentially you're seeing the same thing in Eddington, where not grief, but a worldwide pandemic, they're trying to gain some semblance of control over, and it just manifests itself in everyone, either ending up crippled in a wheelchair or shot in the chest.
Right. I think this is one of the films that I'm going to enjoy reading criticism about, because I think everyone has a different memory of that time.
Totally.
Especially because now that it's been canonized and memory hold, there will be interpretations of 2020, like very, very, very different interpretations of 2020, different interpretations of the George Floyd protests, different interpretations of COVID and how we could have handled it. Hindsight is 2020. I think that's a very fair thing to say about this film and just what anyone might think about that time. Everyone has their own personal traumas that we haven't healed from since the pandemic. We don't want to talk about it directly, and I think it's, like you said, we keep saying that this film is going to make people upset. I don't think that should ever be the goal of filmmaking. I read something about, like, everyone wants to be the next provocateur. I don't want something to just be provocative. But I also don't think the film is like that.
No.
But I am very excited to read everyone's takes on it, from the most critical to the people who love the film as much as we do. The thing that sticks out to me the most, and I want to hear your take on this too, but the thing that sticks out to me the most is something I already mentioned, is just how realistic all the interactions online felt. And I especially love how the film is shot through the perspective of phone screens, like when Sheriff Joe is giving his speech, his campaign speech at that restaurant while there's a riot happening outside. That whole scene is shot through the ring light and his phone, and then there's the scene in his car.
But they even have the Ring camera employed at one time where he's watching the sheriff who goes to his house once he recognizes the handwriting matches up.
Yes, that's
I
right.
mean, there's so many different little snippets of the different ways that communication is transferred in the 2020s.
Bro, that is so true. Why does he have a Ring camera? He's in the middle of nowhere.
And he has like a safe of like ARs.
Yeah.
At one point.
Yes. Oh my God, that's so true. That just I think it's very intentional. It's about the same sort of paranoia and distrust of your neighbor, despite the fact that you're a town of 2,000 people. And you live in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
You have to drive like 25 minutes to get to your house. And it's like seated atop a mountain. You have like line of sight for any invader who might come to your house. And he has a fucking Ring camera and he's watching the sheriff like
question
his mother. Yeah. I'd love to hear as final thoughts, like what stuck out to you the most and what you're excited about for the future of this film, how you think it'll age, maybe.
How this will age, I think that for better or for worse, or for people in terms of how they receive this film, this goes on a long line of just American films, whether it be the slew of films depicting World War II, the Vietnam War, financial crisis, movies like Margin Call and Big Short. This is just
Killers of the Flower Moon.
Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah.
I just think that this is an unabashed look at what I think it's fair to say the majority of the people in worldwide, but it takes place in the U.S. So in the United States, we're both feeling and experiencing at the time, even though it's focused on such a small town, which I'm sure, not coming from one, it'll be interesting, as you said, to read reviews from people who grew up in 3,000 population towns, how accurate they think this film is to them. But I think it's just the first in, what's sort of probably an inevitable canon of films that's going to be kind of COVID-era films.
Yeah.
The only other one I can think of is a different thing in entirety, is Inside by Bo Burnham. But that's sort of in the midst of it, trying to process it as it's going on, Aster's kind of taking a step back and trying to piece together all these things that are happening. And, it seems like where he is kind of landing on is that, we have this cataclysmic event of the pandemic happening, but in the background, there's this whole nother quote unquote demon lurking in the background of solid Magikarp and machine learning. And, you read the review, articles and studies coming out of the amount of entry-level jobs that are getting cut out by AI and the placement of college students after graduation. And, it almost feels like it's headed towards some, potentially, how soon, who knows, but some sort of, economic reckoning like there was in 2008 that is kind of, not our own doing, but just the economy's doing, where, in 2008, just a system that breeded greed, where now a system that is just sort of in an Oppenheimer-esque way going towards something without knowing what the potential consequences are going to be. And I think that last, as funny as it is to see in all bright lights in the desert solid gold Magikarp, there's something harrowing about, all this hate that was built up in division between everyone in the year 2020 and the pandemic and years following until now. It really just feels like it's all for nothing, and we've only grown further and further apart from each other as a community, and it's just created this avenue for a whole nother economic giant to leave its fingerprints on society.
There's always a way to feel like you're not falling down a isolating rabbit hole and being atomized. Like, you have these internet communities where people feel like they might still be a part of something. But now, it's so easy to that people are talking to chatbots and just they have AI girlfriends and they have there are ways of not feeling alone anymore that are so artificial, even more than just having online friends. It's the simulacrum of of a relationship is only going to get better. And these people want to make decisions about the social contract. And they think they have the right to do that, but they're being given the power to. They're just slashing jobs, like you said, left and right. It's completely inhuman. They only care about profit. And it's only going to get more and more atomizing, unfortunately. So I think, you're right. I think the film will age very well.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the, how, there would have been protests for George Floyd, obviously, especially with it being caught on camera as the way it was. But you look at the scale of it and everything that transpired after that event. Would it have been as grand in scale if it weren't at a time where everyone was stuck inside and was looking for some sense of community? With this new AI giant taking place and it making either easier for us to isolate ourselves, and it's only becoming more and more fucked up, the timeline that's getting fed to us on whatever app you're using. But when another, cataclysmic event happens, whether it's a pandemic or just a blatant murder by a cop, how is that going to result itself now, 4 years later?
Well, we have our current example, which is like abhorrent ICE raids that they're making a big show of. They've now increased the budget of ICE like tenfold, and they're making a big show of scooping people off the street using masked, undocumented ICE officers and working with local police, even in cities that are sanctuary cities. That is the new reaction, because we get like these like two types of rallies, like what we saw in LA, where real communities are being hurt by this and people are seeing family members get taken off the streets, right? Versus like the No Kings protests thing, which is like the same kind of vibe as black squares and pink hats.
Yeah.
Right. But we have our current version of that, what it looks like when an actual community is impacted and they get together and they block a highway and they actually have political praxis and they go to a courthouse and stop masked fucking police officers from just snatching someone up unconstitutionally. We do see that work. Now, I will say that this shit was happening during the Biden administration too. It's just the fact that they're making a big show of it at least has mobilized people into doing something. But it feels like it's impossible now that they've just been given free rein to do whatever they want. There's all sorts of stories, I'm a paramedic and I was called to an ICE detention center because somebody was having a heart attack or some sort of chest pains or whatever. And he gives me a completely different name than the person that the ICE says that he is. That they're just like, without due process, without any sort of, without lawyers or anything, just grabbing people. And that is, I think, our current version of, if anything is to be done, if any movement is going to transpire out of this, it would have to be this. Yeah. Right? And especially in communities that are really being impacted by it.
Yeah. And I think I can't assume, obviously this film was written before. You would assume it must have wrapped up production before Trump was reelected, before, ICE raids were taking place. But really,
in the same way that they are now, they were still taking place.
Yeah. It feels like Ari Aster had his finger on the pulse in terms of, like I've said, with kind of this new beast of AI corporations harvesting more and more data. You're seeing the contracts you mentioned earlier, like Palantir, who are going to be, this whole different form of surveillance state that's going to be, enacting all sorts of more, creating more and more division between each other.
Yeah. Also a way to track political activists or, people who actually want to do something about, or, facial recognition technology will make masks completely worthless, and just any sort of action against a completely out of control government, almost impossible. There's so much in this film. We didn't talk at all about the Pueblo relationship and Native Americans, which is something that I don't know enough about the relationship in New Mexico or anything like that, which I think is a whole other story. When he's running from the Antifa super soldiers, he falls through a museum, a Native American museum.
And the fact that he commits the shooting on Pueblo soil, and there's the whole...
whose case is this, right?
Exactly.
And then they suggest bringing in the FBI, and he's like, just leave me alone. He freaks out. I think there's a lot to be said there, but that's another reason I love the film so much. You can attack it from so many different angles. Yeah. So many cool things to say. But yeah, I think we can leave it for now. Definitely go check out Eddington.
Go see it.
Yeah.
It's even if you hate it, it's one of those films.
It's provocative. It is, and I can't wait to hear why people hate it.
Yeah.
It's gonna spend the rest of the day reading reviews probably, And
I mean, I knew coming into this, I was gonna. This is a hate it or love it movie.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the person who walks out of the theater and says, "It was decent." that person is not going to exist.
It is unrelenting, which is part of the reason why it's going to be so like love it or hate it, because it's long and it doesn't let off the gas really at all. Every scene is just filled with something to cringe at or get mad at or laugh about. It's just constant. So yeah, go see it. Definitely go see it. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to the Radio FWD podcast, Mike. Thanks for coming on, man.
This is a lot of fun.
This is a cool, like, full circle moment.
Yeah.
Have a good friend of mine on.
Couldn't be a better movie to talk about.
Definitely.
Too much, too.
Yeah. And stay tuned for some more episodes of the Radio FWD podcast. Thanks so much.